Alright, let's get into this. Picture this, a guy named Mark, just your average dude, probably working in some office cubicle before all hell broke loose. He was in downtown Chicago, maybe grabbing a coffee, when it started. Not with a bang, but a whimper. People were acting weird. Just bumping into things, bumping into each other, but without any recognition. Then, it escalated. Mark saw it happen right across the street. A woman, looking perfectly normal 1 second, suddenly lunged at a guy, tearing into his arm with her teeth like some kind of rabid animal. The scream was choked off, replaced by a gurgling, wet sound. Mark froze, his coffee cup slipping from his numb fingers and shattering on the pavement. He saw more. A paramedic, trying to help someone lying on the ground, suddenly get bitten and then, within minutes, his eyes glazed over, his movements jerky and uncontrolled, and he was on the attack. The sheer brutality of it, the way people he'd seen just hours before were now mindless, flesh-hungry things, it was like a nightmare playing out in real time. He watched, paralyzed, as a small group of survivors, a few office workers and a cop, fought their way out of a collapsing storefront, leaving behind a trail of screaming, stumbling figures. That first day was a blur of disbelief and sheer, gut-wrenching terror. He hid in an alley, the sounds of chaos, screams, roars, the sickening crunch of bone, echoing around him. The smell, oh God, the smell. It was coppery, sickly sweet, and utterly horrifying. It clung to the air, a constant reminder of what was happening. His mind raced, trying to process the impossible. These weren't movie monsters, these were people, his neighbors, strangers, now driven by an insatiable hunger. The initial shock gave way to a primal urge to survive. He needed to get out, to find a safe place, to figure out what this was and how to stop it, or at least, how to live through it. But where? Everywhere he looked, it was the same story unfolding: panic, violence, and the terrifying transformation. He spent days just trying to evade them, scavenging for anything he could eat or drink. A stale cracker here, a bottle of water from a discarded bag there. He saw others, too, survivors like him, but the fear was palpable. You couldn't trust anyone. Was that person running towards you a potential ally, or another one of them in disguise, waiting to pounce? He saw a group get ambushed by a lone shambler, the swift, brutal efficiency of the attack leaving him breathless. They were so relentless, so unthinking. As the days bled into weeks, the desperation grew. Food became scarcer, and the infected, or walkers, as he'd started calling them in his head, were everywhere. He remembered seeing a family, trying to escape in their car, only for the car to stall. The horror on their faces as the herd descended, it was something that would never leave him. So, here I am, Mark. Just me, holed up in what used to be a bookstore, trying to make sense of this mess. I'm documenting this because I don't know if anyone else will ever hear it. If you're out there, listening, and if you can survive this, remember this. Remember the humanity we're fighting to protect. And hey, if you're finding this somehow, maybe hit that subscribe button and leave a like, alright? It's probably the last thing I'll ever ask. The quiet was the worst. It wasn't a peaceful quiet, but a tense, waiting kind of quiet, the kind that makes your teeth ache. I'd spent the last few days scavenging for anything edible, mostly canned goods from abandoned houses. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the broken windows, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I rigged up a makeshift alarm system using tin cans and fishing line, but it was more for my own peace of mind than any real protection. I hadn't seen any signs of them since that first brutal encounter, but that didn't mean they weren't out there, watching. I found a slightly more intact section of the bookstore, a small reading nook with a surprisingly sturdy wooden desk. This became my new base. I spread out my meager findings, a half-eaten can of beans, a compass I'd found in a hiking backpack, and a tattered map of the surrounding towns. The map was mostly useless now, roads were probably impassable, and towns were likely ghost towns, or worse. Still, it was something to focus on, a way to pretend there was still a plan. One afternoon, while venturing further into the deserted streets, I heard a faint noise. It wasn't the usual wind or the settling of buildings. It was singing. A child's voice, off-key but clear. My heart leaped. A child. That meant other survivors, maybe even a settlement. Hope, a dangerous thing in this new world, flared up. I cautiously followed the sound, moving from shadow to shadow, my senses on high alert. The singing led me to a small, walled garden behind what looked like a former community center. Peeking through a gap in the overgrown bushes, I saw her. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on an overturned bucket, humming to a collection of chipped porcelain dolls. She was thin, her clothes patched and faded, but her face held a defiant spark. Relief washed over me, so strong it almost buckled my knees. I stepped out, my hands raised to show I was unarmed. The girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide. For a moment, fear registered on her face, but then it shifted to a cautious curiosity. "Hello," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath. "Hi. My name is Mark. Are you okay?" She nodded, clutching one of the dolls tighter. "I'm Lily. Mommy said to stay here. She went to find food." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. "When did she go?" I asked, my voice softer now. Lily shrugged. "A few days ago." My hope began to curdle into a familiar, cold dread. I spent the next few days with Lily. She was resourceful, managing to find edible roots and berries in the garden. We shared my canned beans, rationing them carefully. I tried to get her to tell me more about her mother, about where they came from, but she was too young to remember much. The singing stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before, punctuated only by Lily's quiet sobs at night. Then, one morning, as the sun cast long shadows across the overgrown garden, I saw movement at the far end of the street. Not the shambling, predatory kind of movement I'd come to dread. This was organized. People. A small group, moving with purpose, carrying weapons that looked more like actual firearms than makeshift clubs. They were heading straight for the community center. Lily saw them too. Her eyes widened, not with fear this time, but with a dawning recognition. "Mommy," she breathed, scrambling to her feet. My heart pounded. Was it possible? Could her mother have found help? Or was this another kind of danger? I stood, my hand instinctively reaching for the rusty pipe I kept for protection, watching as the group approached, their faces grim, their eyes scanning their surroundings with practiced vigilance. Okay, so picture this: Mark, a regular guy, like you or me, was just trying to get home after a long day at his office job in downtown Chicago. He's on the elevated train, staring out the window, thinking about what to make for dinner, when all hell breaks loose. Sirens start blaring, not just one or two, but a whole symphony of them, all sounding wrong. Then he sees it. People running. Screaming. And then, the truly gut-wrenching part, a woman, normally so put together, gnawing on another person's arm like it was a goddamn drumstick. Mark's stomach flips. He's frozen, unable to process what his eyes are telling him. He spills out of the train station, joining the chaos. It's a nightmare made real. The air is thick with the smell of something metallic and foul. He sees a businessman, Ty Askew, fumbling with his briefcase, completely oblivious to the shambling figure heading his way. Then, the businessman's scream, cut short. Mark ducks into a nearby alley, his breath catching in his throat. He peeks around the corner and sees the thing. It's a grotesque parody of a human, skin peeled back in some places, limbs twisted at unnatural angles, moving with a jerky, relentless gait. Its eyes, milky and vacant, fix on a fleeing jogger. The sounds that come out of it, not human. A guttural, raspy hunger. This is it. This is the end of everything. The sheer, overwhelming horror washes over him. He's not thinking about his job, his apartment, his bills. He's thinking about survival. Pure, animalistic survival. He sees a discarded police baton leaning against a dumpster and snatches it up. It's heavy, solid. His only real weapon. He's terrified, his hands shaking, but a cold, hard resolve starts to settle in. He can't just stand here and die. He has to move. He has to find a way out. But where? Every street is a fresh horror show. He sees a small grocery store, its windows already smashed, and a desperate hope flickers. Maybe there's something inside. Maybe he can barricade himself, just for a little while. The thought of being alone, truly alone, in this mess is almost as bad as the monsters themselves. He takes a shaky breath, the metallic tang of fear in his mouth, and sprints towards the broken storefront, the baton clutched tight in his sweaty grip. The grocery store was worse than he'd imagined. Shelves were overturned, their contents scattered and trampled. A thick layer of dust coated everything, stirred by his entry. He could smell something foul, a mix of rot and something acrid, definitely not food. Still, he needed a place, any place, to catch his breath. He found a sturdy-looking wooden counter and managed to drag a fallen display rack, heavy with canned goods, in front of it. It wasn't much, but it felt like a victory. He leaned against the counter, the rough wood digging into his back, and tried to control his breathing. The sounds from outside were a constant, low hum of chaos. He could hear distant screams, the crunch of debris, and something that sounded like heavy, dragging footsteps. Each noise sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He peered through a gap in the shattered window, scanning the street. Shapes moved in the gloom, indistinct and terrifying. They weren't human. Not anymore. Panic began to set in again, a cold wave washing over him. He was trapped. What was the point of hiding if they would just break in? He scanned the store again, his eyes landing on a narrow doorway at the back. It looked like it led to a storeroom or maybe an exit. A flicker of renewed determination ignited within him. He had to try. He couldn't just sit here and wait. He grabbed his baton, hefted it, and moved towards the back. The floorboards creaked under his weight, each sound an alarm bell. He paused, listening. Nothing. He continued, his heart pounding against his ribs. The doorway led to a small, cramped storeroom. It was filled with more debris, but also a heavy metal door on the far side. This had to be it. An exit. He rushed to it, fumbling with the latch. It was stiff, rusted, and wouldn't budge. He threw his shoulder against it, grunting with effort. Still nothing. He looked around desperately. A rusty pipe lay on the floor, thick and heavy. He picked it up and used it to lever the latch. With a screech of protesting metal, it finally gave way. He yanked the door open and stumbled out into a narrow alleyway. It was dark, filled with overflowing dumpsters, but blessedly quiet. He leaned against the brick wall, gulping in the slightly less foul air. He was out of the store, but where was he? He couldn't see the street from here. He took a few more deep breaths, trying to calm his racing heart. He looked back at the grocery store, the dark maw of its broken entrance. He had escaped, for now. But the alleyway felt like another cage. He needed to find a way out of this nightmare, a place that wasn't filled with the constant threat of what lurked in the shadows. He pushed himself off the wall and began to move down the alley, his senses on high alert. So, picture this, Mark was just trying to grab some milk. Normal Tuesday, you know. He's in the aisle, staring at the endless rows of cartons, when the screaming starts. Not like, oops, I dropped a jar, screaming. This was primal, raw, like someone was being torn apart. He peeks around the end of the aisle, and that's when his world just breaks. Outside the grocery store, it wasn't just chaos, it was pure, unadulterated pandemonium. People weren't running from something, they were running towards each other, but not in a good way. He saw a woman, a mother with a stroller just moments before, tackle a man to the ground. Her eyes were milky white, and her mouth, God, her mouth was stretched impossibly wide as she bit into his arm with a sickening crunch. The man's screams were cut short, replaced by guttural moans as his own flesh started to ripple, his skin darkening, his limbs twisting into unnatural angles. It wasn't a virus, it was a transformation, a grotesque metamorphosis into something monstrous. Mark's stomach churned. He felt a cold sweat break out, prickling his skin. His first instinct was to run, to hide, but where? Every street was a tableau of horror. A police car, sirens still blaring, had crashed into a bus, and out of the shattered windows crawled figures that were once human, now shambling, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, but terrifyingly purposeful. Their hunger was palpable, radiating off them like heat. He saw a small group trying to barricade themselves in a shop, their faces a mask of terror, only for the door to splinter inwards, revealing a tide of gnashing teeth and vacant stares. The sheer disbelief warred with a burgeoning panic. This wasn't a movie, this was real, and he was in the middle of it. He saw a man, his own neighbor, lunging at a woman who was desperately trying to pull away. The raw brutality, the utter lack of recognition in the attacker's eyes, it seared itself into Mark's mind. He felt a primal urge to scream, to fight, but his body was frozen, his brain struggling to process the unimaginable. He was just a regular guy, not some action hero. The milk forgotten, the normalcy of his life shattered into a million pieces, Mark realized he was utterly alone in a world that had suddenly become a predator. The alleyway, though dark and terrifying, offered a sliver of concealment, a temporary reprieve from the unfolding nightmare. He had to keep moving, had to find a way, any way, out of this descent into madness. Mark's breath hitched as he stumbled further into the narrow passage. The stench of overflowing dumpsters and something sickly sweet hung heavy in the air. He flattened himself against the cold brick, straining to hear over the pounding in his chest. A scraping sound echoed from the street ahead, too deliberate to be random. It was coming closer. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, trying to push back the panic. He was just Mark, the guy who sometimes burned toast. This wasn't him. But it was happening to him. He had to do something. Anything. He edged forward, one cautious step at a time. The alley curved, opening into a slightly wider space cluttered with discarded furniture and overflowing bins. A hulking shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness, moving with an unsettling fluidity. It was the figure he'd glimpsed earlier, but now, closer, the sheer wrongness of its form was undeniable. It wasn't human. Not entirely. Its limbs seemed too long, its movements jerky, unnatural. Mark froze, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his feet felt rooted to the grimy concrete. The creature paused, its head tilting as if listening, or perhaps sensing him. A low guttural noise rumbled from its unseen throat. Mark's mind raced. He looked around wildly, searching for an exit, a weapon, anything. His gaze landed on a rusted metal pipe lying near a pile of sodden cardboard. It was heavy, awkward, but it was something. He moved with a stealth he didn't know he possessed, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The creature took another lumbering step towards the opening of the alley. With a surge of adrenaline, Mark lunged, scooping up the pipe. It felt cold and solid in his trembling hands. He didn't know if he could even swing it properly, let alone hurt whatever that thing was. But he couldn't just stand there. As the creature emerged into the dim light, revealing more of its grotesque features, elongated jaws, eyes that seemed to glow faintly, Mark tightened his grip. He wasn't going to be a victim. Not without a fight. He braced himself, the pipe held out in front of him, a pathetic defense against the encroaching horror. He took a deep, shaky breath, preparing for whatever came next. The alley, once a sanctuary of darkness, now felt like the stage for a final, desperate act. Thank you for joining us on this journey through uncertainty. As we've navigated these harrowing experiences, the echoes of desperate struggles and the resilience of the human spirit have undoubtedly resonated. We've seen individuals pushed to their absolute limits, facing unimaginable threats with a mix of terror and determination. Remember the young woman who, trapped in a collapsing structure, used her knowledge of the building's layout to find a precarious escape route, her quick thinking saving her from being crushed. Or the group who, isolated and low on supplies, pooled their meager resources, sharing the last of their water and devising a plan to signal for help, demonstrating the power of collective action even in the face of overwhelming odds. These narratives, while fictional, serve as stark reminders of the importance of preparedness. In any crisis, whether it's a widespread societal breakdown or a more personal emergency, having a plan and essential supplies can be the difference between life and a far grimmer alternative. A core principle of survivalism is adaptability, the ability to adjust to rapidly changing circumstances. Always consider developing a practical skill that could prove invaluable. Learning basic first aid, for instance, or the ability to purify water, can empower you to handle situations where professional help is unavailable. More than any physical skill or tool, however, is the mastery of one's own mind. In moments of sheer panic, when the instinct is to freeze or flee blindly, the ability to remain calm is paramount. It allows for rational thought, for the assessment of the situation, and for the implementation of a well-considered strategy. The individual who managed to navigate the chaotic streets by staying low, moving deliberately, and observing the patterns of the encroaching threat, rather than succumbing to fear, understood this fundamental truth. Their controlled movements and keen observation allowed them to bypass immediate danger and find a safer path forward. As we conclude, we urge you to internalize these lessons. Be prepared, be resourceful, and above all, be calm. The future is uncertain, but by taking proactive steps, we can face it with greater confidence and a stronger chance of weathering any storm. We hope you found this exploration insightful and thought-provoking. If you did, please consider subscribing for more content and sharing your own thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your engagement helps us all learn and grow.